Locho ya sambo pa gyo trashi pa tuche tempe chinle yarngo da pege drolor zambe tsepar chem pande lame shabla solwade Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Sanekar Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nisha Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Dagi Jetsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Siksu So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Uyon Sunge Nawa Tsedo So Tseche Nyingne Sowa Debe Tse Dechen Korlo Visu Lekshun Yila Sambe Dede Malupa Gemel Hunge Drupra Jingelo Tsoni Sogdan Dikdun Shakpe Tse Dunge Namke Yinsu Lekshun Lapchen Tsoni Yonsu Tsopa Dan Cheranye Dun Chamra Chingelo Chanchu Parge Ninsen Tugun Tu Nyu Peme Siudru Lekshune Chanchu Drube Gegen Kunshishi Tungen De La Drupra Jingelo Dagi Lona Chela Chokpa Dan Chemin Samjur Ngemba Shiwa Dan Chedan Tumbe Dede Malupa Bemel Hungi Drupra Jingelo Dorna Tingne Tsira Tamche Dan Techi Pardune Gautam Rese Kyamne Lama Keleme Tukche Chingi Dala Siksu Sol Gongyab Trewe Nyamta Dachala Jetsun Lame Tuje Rab Gongne Kudan Sungi Nawa Dralme Tu Nyamsu Nyongwe Kesan Tobra Shua Kewa Kundu Yanda Lamad Drame Cheki Pela Longche Chin Sadan Lamge Yende Rabzon Dorje Change Koba Nyur Tobe Sho Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Lu Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Pakyuke Tugdan Dagi Yi Tuen Yerme Chiktu Chingi Lu Makyuke Kudan Dagi Lu Makyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Makyuke Tugdan Dagi Yi Tuen Yerme Chiktu chingelo. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakya Muni Svoha. Sashi Puki Chukshi Medo Chan Rirab Lingshi Nide Gembadi Sangye Shindul Mikde Ulwargi Drogu Namda Shingla Cheparasho Yedam Guru Ratna Mandrala Kam Niryata Yami Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonamla Jancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamki Drola Pinchire Sangye Druparasho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonamla Jancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamki Drola Pinchire Sangye Druparasho Sangye Chodan Tsogi Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamki Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparasho. Nel Buddha, nel Dharma e nel Sangha prendo rifugio fino all'illuminazione. Con la pratica della generosità e delle altre perfezioni possa io ottenere lo stato di Buddha per il beneficio di tutti gli esseri senzienti. Laie ke dan lu dan nue chin ke drupon da da mi kenam dan druwa kungi ranam chi sampa tam che ke du da ge che tento.
Good morning. Each one of us, every time we relate to something, every time we see someone, that we live any kind of situation, inevitably, we live it, we experience it through what we call the filter of ourselves. And it's not a filter that's made up of one level. There are many levels of this filter. It's as if there were different, I take many filters that are superimposed, and we put them together and we experience our reality. Of these filters, we're aware of some of them, and there's a part that we're not aware of at all. There's a very strong part that's made up of this like social cultural context in which we were raised, and we're not even aware not even aware that that filter exists. I mean, we're here, we just have no idea. Then there's a part that comes from our own traumas, our own desires, our own expectations. There's a part that's made up of our own worldview, in the sense that it could also philosophical, religious worldview. It has many, many levels. Of all these levels, one very important aspect is that we are not able to relate to anything or anyone independently of these filters. And it's not because there are religious people that have one perspective, and then one who's not religious doesn't have this perspective. Everyone has his own filters. So it's something that's really important is to start from the fact that each person lives within his own paradigm, his own worldview, and this it applies to everyone. The paradigm in which we live, very often we're not even aware, because our own ignorance from the beginning is to not see that we live within our own paradigm, and we believe that our paradigm is the reality that we are simply perceiving. This is something very common. I remember once I was speaking to a group of scientists. We were at the table together at dinner, and we were talking about the various aspects of reality. Most of them were psychiatrists and psychologists, and our common point, we found that we all live within our own paradigm, and so this starting point is the awareness of this. And when we talk about a religion is made up mostly of two parts, eh, regardless of the religion. A part is its own worldview. So there's a part that the religion brings with itself a vision of what is real, what is not real, how reality is. It brings with it also a part of conduct. So when in front of this worldview, what should one do? What should one not do? How one should behave, not behave. And then there's a third part that has to do with the tools that are offered. Prayer, meditation, um, um, fasting. There are many different types of tools that are used to be able to realize this view. And in all religions, in my opinion, I think we're really the same. But what's really important for me to see clearly, and often we forget, you know, just there's Buddhism and Christianity and other religions. We have some worldviews that are like religions, but we don't call them as such. If we go to see, and it's important to see this because we follow these views. For example, up till just not too long ago, I think we're talking about just a couple of centuries ago, the most widespread view among humans was a was a vision, was what gave meaning to life was God. Okay, so um, so even if one had to go to war and die for something higher, it's okay. It was okay, fine. What gave meaning to life was to follow the rules that were given and live for something higher than ourselves. And then little by little, the more common view and the one that we were raised in is more of a humanistic view, in what gives meaning to life is the human being himself. So we substituted God with human beings. So anything that's done for the good of humanity and the good of the individual is justified. I don't know if this is clear. So we can treat animals in the worst way possible, as long as it's at the service of humanity, or we can destroy nature as long as it's at the service of humanity. We could make terrible choices as long as it's for me, and everything goes around the individual. And this is a worldview. There are rules, and there are the tools to get there. I'm not the best person to talk about these things because I've never really studied deeply, but observing these are worldviews, and these are worldviews in which that we find in which we find ourselves. And what's really interesting is you know is to see how we are very strongly part of these worldviews. I mean, when you study traditionally Buddhist philosophy, as I did at the monastery of Sera, one of the first subjects that is studied is called Drupta. Drupta is Siddhanta in Sanskrit, which means world views, the philosophical schools. And among these worldviews, the one definition that's given, so having a worldview is something that having a worldview, um, having a worldview that one is absolutely sure of. One is 100% sure without any doubts. It's like this. That's it. I mean, this is so having one's own philosophical view is this. So what happens is that we have there's a I mean we have a part of our worldview that we're not even aware of having that was created during our childhood, because we work a little bit like this. Every time that when we're faced with something, our tendency is, what is it? I mean, how do we work? I see forms, I see colors, I live a certain experience. I see my past experiences, and I try to see that among those past experiences or that past knowledge, if I'm able to understand and judge the present. So our tendency is to re know, to recognize something. So normally we look to the past to understand the present. I mean, this is the way we're made. And so in those first years of life, we are actually constructing our worldview, constructing ourselves. So if the first times I drink water, I feel sick. Every time that I'm faced with water, it's going to be difficult for me to drink water. This is just a simple example, but I think that observing, we can all see this in our lives. You don't need a degree in philosophy to understand this, but when we're small, there are concepts that are transmitted to us, to our family, to our teachers, to the society in which we live, that gradually form, they shape our own worldview. And our worldview determines the way we relate to every situation, to every person, and everything. So when Buddhist philosophy is studied more deeply, we should start from recognizing what our own worldview, our starting point is, because we were not born in the world view that was transmitted by Lord Buddha. It was very different from what is common um, to our the worldview in which we find ourselves. I mean, they're they're very different from what comes to us spontaneously. So their starting point is to understand what is the worldview that I find myself in. And this is not an easy job. And antique Buddhist text talks about the worldviews that were present in India about 1,500 years ago. So we study the philosophical view of Samkhya. There are two types principally: the materialistic worldviews, which in Tibetan, when I studied, they're called Kyampempa, those who believe only in what can be seen or touched. It's a total materialistic worldview. It's similar to our scientific view, because even within the scientific view, there are different views. If you talk to a scientist who has a, a mechanical view, or another scientist who has a quantum view, you'll see how different these two views are. Today, I quickly looked at the news today, and there was an article on the BBC that said that 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 the physicists say that the future has already arrived. Okay, let's leave that aside. Let's come back to us. I mean, so there are different worldviews, but the worldview, you know, what exists is what I see. Is a material world without taking in consideration um, without taking into consideration the observer. This existed in India 1,500 years ago. And then there are other worldviews that are more spiritual. So visions, views that think that there's a continuity after death, for example. Schools that look at how important the observer is. So here there's this importance of transcendence after death. And even here, there are many views within that. But we have been raised with worldviews that are different from the worldviews that existed in India 1,500 years ago. It's important for us to see what our worldview is, because that will determine for us, determine what gives meaning for us. And this is an aspect that's very strong. And it's not enough just to understand, because it's deep inside of us. I mean, to take away those filters, change those filters, you really need a lot. But seeing them is a lot. So I invite all of you to reflect on this, even if it's not so obvious. But if we observe, we're living in this era of this humanistic era, where this worldview, where at the center of this worldview is man. So, and for anything to be of meaning, um, it needs to exist at the function of man, or specifically of an individual. So, by observing myself and around me and the behavior of our society, and this is something that's very present. Just look, just see that in other contexts in the past, one wouldn't ask so often, how are you? I mean, we are a little obsessed at how we feel and how we are. How is this I? But which doesn't necessarily bring us to a state of better well-being. So originally, before getting to this humanistic view, said that society was divided into an animist and also a theist worldview, where the animists were, in an animist worldview, that human being is part of nature, like animals. They share the same spaces. They're as important. There's not a relationship of superiority, the human beings over animals, and instead in the humanistic view, the man possesses nature. So there's this aspect of superiority and inferiority when thinking of other beings like animals. And we were raised in this worldview. I mean, this is part of the way we see things. It's deeply. Now, in Buddhism, mostly, it can be divided into two parts. The worldview that Buddha transmitted, and at the same time, the conduct, behavior, and that was necessary to be able to live accordingly. Because once you have realized this worldview, it comes spontaneously, but that would take time. So just to repeat, before getting into Buddha's worldview, let me just repeat something. It's really it's important that we're aware that whether we want to or not, we have our own worldview. We have so many levels and filters inside. And so we're already there. When I when I when I was studying this aspect and reflecting on it, I saw that I studied the various non-Buddhist schools, and at a certain point I asked, but in our modern context, in our modern context to today, where is the basis of this worldview? And I saw that there were mostly, we could say there are three filters that make up our worldview. There's this part that is, we're influenced by the monotheistic religions. We have a part that is based on the capitalism, and there's a part that is based also on the view that can be called like mechanical, like the Newtonian, an external solid reality. And then we can also add an aspect like humanistic, where individualistic, where man is at the center of everything. These are the parts that make up our current worldview. And what's interesting that until we're aware of having a worldview, we think that our worldview is reality. And if we see even world conflicts, they were often conflicts between worldviews, groups of people with different worldviews. Even if we look at, like during the Second World War, the difference between, between the right and the extreme left. I mean, these arise from the conflicts in worldview. So, I mean, it's very powerful. It's among one of those powerful things that exist on a personal level and on a global level. And inevitably, we live within a world view. So, for example, the world view in which we find ourselves today, where the man, the individual, is the most important. I mean, it's every decade, it's changing. It's changing. It's very subtly changing, but we start from this view where man is at the center of everyone, or humanity is at the center of everything, and the individual even more. So everything is justified by that, and at the same time, we can see it doesn't matter what happens to the environment, what happens to animals, as long as man is benefited. And personally as well, humanity, and to personally, and then, and on a capitalistic viewpoint, let there be a financial benefit. I thinking about something simple, for the realization of the temple, for like the heating system, I chose to put the geothermal heating system. And when I spoke to many people, they they all said, yeah, because then you would save money. I say, okay, yeah, that's great that we would save money, but the reason why I chose that was not to save money. It was a system that I found that had like the least environmental impact. It seemed like the most most intelligent way to use the natural resources without impacting negatively the environment. So this is an example, one example that what justifies our actions is how our financial gain. This is part of a worldview. So it's important for us to really see well what worldview we're part of. And we'll see that are we're part of a worldview that is strongly individualistic, that generates many problems. But we anyway. Now, and let me repeat, it's not that there's one worldview that is perfect and another is absolute, that is wrong. I'm not here to criticize the world in which we live, but it's important to see it, to see that which aspects are beneficial, which ones are harmful, and then we gradually can direct our mind. The good news is that we're not linked to any worldview for life. I mean, we have this ability to change and to transform our own worldview. And the main objective when we talk about a person being Buddhist, in reality, needs to get as close as possible to the worldview that was transmitted by Buddha. Because it's a worldview that is very coherent. It brings us to what at the end, it brings us to what everyone wants in the end, which is a state of well-being, deep state of peace. It's what we all want. Balance. So let's try to understand a little bit how this worldview is formed, this worldview transmitted by Buddha. There are 4 pillars, or they're called 4 seals as well, because Buddha taught differently to according to the people that were there. For example, the monastic vows, the part of conduct, Buddha explained this. He gave the same teachings in 18 different ways because they were different. They were 18 different cities, 18 different contexts, and where there were groups of people that lived in different contexts, so some rules applied to some and some to not. For example, to one group he said that vows are for life. And to others he said you can choose. You can take vows for a certain amount of time, or you can take it for life. And then the tradition that arrived in Tibet was for life. Instead, the tradition that was that spread in Thailand, is the one where the vows can be taken for a certain amount of time. That could be 6 months, a year, etc. When it came to Tibet, because Atisha had this tradition, and when he arrived, one of his disciples, and they said to Atisha, this Tibetan population is too wild. It's too wild. So we need to have the most rigid vows possible, as if let's imagine, imagine that imagine that in Brazil you could take vows for just a certain amount of period. You could take them for 10 months, and then Carnival comes around and you can leave your vows and party for 2 months and then take vows again. But so this is just to say that Buddha taught differently to different people, even on a philosophical teachings. And it's really beautiful to see, because when we take these teachings and we 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 put them one next to the other, they can seem contradictory. Some are, but when we put them together, all together, what seems contradictory in reality is more than being contradictory. We can say it's complementary. Each philosophical view is like a step that allows you, to get up the stairs. And these these four philosophical these four philosophical views come from four philosophical schools, four different ways of seeing things, because it's not possible to get to a certain worldview without passing through others. One could fall into erroneous views. So Buddha starts with a worldview called Vaibhasika. This view, Chetamawa in Tibetan, is a vision where Buddha talks mostly about reality as it exists. He explains that action brings results, that there's a physical reality where one can know this. He gives enormous emphasis on the conduct of body and speech, how one should behave verbally, physically, how to relate in society with others. Talks about this external reality and how important it is to manage it all well, to relate well. And then the Sautantrika view, Dodepa in Tibetan, is a view where Buddha starts to introduce the part of the mind. There's always that external solid part, but he starts to talk more about the psychological aspects. For example, it's where he talks about how the observer influences the way in which he experiences the world around him. And then there's a third view called Chittamatra, which means mind only school. It's the view where the Buddha goes to the other extreme. Here says that everything exists only in the mind. It gives a lot of emphasis to the importance of the observer, and explains that we create the world in which we live because we have all these filters. Everything that we perceive is a reflection of our own reality. I'm simplifying even too much here. To study these four philosophical schools, to understand them, one needs a lot of time. But just to give a general idea. And after this third school, so from this extreme of eternalism, that things exist, this so he's starting from eternalism, where external things exist, and then goes to the extreme of the mind, is this extreme of nihilism, where what exists is only the mind. There's nothing other than the mind. But he never said that there's only the mind. What he said is nothing exists independently of one's mind. And then he comes to the fourth school, Madhyamika, which is the middle way. He says external reality exists, but it doesn't exist independently from our inner reality. So the danger is, if one goes right away to the Madhyamika school, one could fall into the extreme of thinking that nothing exists. Anyway, these four schools bring us, one step after the other, they bring us to his own worldview. But in all of these schools, there are common points. So what determines that a worldview is part of Buddha's worldview? Because there are 18 schools. The first school is made of 18 schools. The second made of 2, the third made of 4, and the fourth made up of 2, all with philosophical ideas that are lightly different, but they have 4 points in common. regardless of the school, and they're called the Four Seals. You know, now we have like a now we have the like a seal for organically made. You know, how do you know if something is organic? So like some certification that it's organic. So what's the certification for something, for a teaching to be Buddhist? And it's here in the Four Seals. And so what I want to share with you just briefly, because obviously to go deeply into these four seals we need more time. So these four seals are 4 points that if we're able to understand them, if we're able to follow them, there's an enormous benefit in our lives. Obviously, this Buddhist philosophy has this aspect where in practice, I mean, it's very easy. It's not so complicated. But if we want to deepen it, we could study. We could study our entire lives, and we wouldn't finish. I mean, it's just the beauty of Buddhist teachings. I was speaking the other day to our to our to Geshe Losang Punsok, who's a great master here, who has studied his entire life. He just finished a 3-year retreat, and he now wants to just keep studying. I mean, we can. There's the there's so much to study, even just to study even just to, it's 18 to 25 years of full-time study to study Buddhist philosophy, you know, like full-time, you know, 11 months a year, 6 days a week. Normally it's about 18 years without going into to techniques of meditation or tantra, you know, just the part of philosophy. But the good news is that to apply in our lives, you don't need all of that. There are things that are much simpler but make all the difference. Luckily, there are people who study this to maintain this knowledge, the living knowledge. But for most of us, you know, we don't have to go into all these details. But let's come back to these 4 points. So these are the 4 seals of the view of Buddha. In Tibetan they are Duche Tampa. Speaking Tibetan. Duche Tampa. All phenomenon, all composed phenomenon are impermanent. All composed phenomena are impermanent. All that is impure is of the nature of suffering. Everything that is impure is of the nature of suffering. All phenomena and everything that exists is empty and lacks its own identity. Beyond suffering is peace. Now, what does this all mean? Let's try to look at them one by one, in a simple way. I mean, they seem more difficult than what they are. Of course, we can always complicate, but they're really quite simple. So the first one, all phenomenon, all composed phenomenon are impermanent. What do we mean by composed phenomenon? Everything that interacts one with the other, everything that depends on causes and conditions. In other words, anything that we can see, touch, hear, our all objects of perception of our five senses, and all objects of our mind. These are all composed phenomena. Anything that interacts with other phenomena, those are composed phenomena. All composed phenomena are impermanent. What does it mean to be impermanent? The definition of permanence is of impermanence is kechi kechi kechikpa. It says sounds nice too. Kechi kechi kechik means an instant. In an instant. It's interesting. I mean, this is a very specific definition. So it's the time of a breath, which is 4 seconds, divided by 67 parts, and one of those parts is defined as an instant because it's said that it is the smallest amount of time that a human being can perceive. I think that there's also a part in the modern science that defines also the smallest amount of time, but at even at ancient times, I mean, Buddha, even not just Buddha, but even in astrology, for example, how to count and calculate time. We use references, and we're used to talking about hours and seconds and minutes, but what's the reference point for that? We have we have a reference point, which is this is the earth that turns around itself. We have a reference point that of also the earth that turns around the sun, or the moon that turns around the earth. I mean, these are phenomena that repeat itself quite constantly. I mean, this is the time, the reference of time starts here, but uh, in the in ancient India, the it was actually one's own breath that was the reference point, and one breath is 4 seconds. A healthy breath, it would be measured in 4 seconds. So so in one day, one could have this many breaths. So 21,000 breaths. It was used as a reference point. So each breath is divided into 67 parts. Even in astrological calculations, like where is Jupiter? Jupiter is 2 days. There are these, the unity of measures. So 10 minutes, and not minutes, like hours, and 3 breaths, with 30 parts, and each part goes up to 67, and then at each 67th part is divided into 707 parts, and then according to the planet is also is divided. I mean, this is how the ancient Indian Vedic systems calculated in astrology. So getting back to this instant kechi kechi chikpa, this definition. So 1/67th of a breath, the one instant, and chikpa means to transform. So what is in constant transformation? What transforms from instant to instant? Often, when we say something is impermanent, we think that it's something that exists and one day won't exist anymore. But this is not impermanent. Impermanent means that it's in constant transformation. That from instant to instant, it is in constant transformation. Even an instant can be divided into even smaller units. But it's considered but we're talking about this instant that the smallest unit that a human being can observe, or so kitchi 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 pop is in is what a man can everything is in constant. What is in constant transformation? Why do things transform? Why? Why do phenomena transform? Because they interact. The more interaction there is, the greater the transformation will be. And every time that there's an interaction, inevitably there'll be a transformation. When there's an interaction, there'll be transformation, and all these composed phenomena, these so-called composed phenomenon, they can't not interact. In every moment, we are interacting with an infinite quantity of objects, people, thoughts, and every interaction, every thought, every sound, every experience, just interacts with everything else, and every interaction brings a transformation. And what's magic about all of this is that at this, so, everything that everything, absolutely everything is in constant transformation. Ourselves, our social context, everything. I mean, this is not linear. It's not that I do this and this is going to happen. It's a transformation that is multilateral. I mean, it is in transformation with many things. I mean, just look at a human being. I mean, we are not the result we're not the result of a linear transformation. What we are today is the result of our own actions, choices, the context in which we grew up, and the one we find ourselves in now. We're influenced by our environment, the choices of other people, by our thoughts, our reactions. We're influenced by an enormous quantity of things, and everything influences the next. So a thought is going to influence the following thoughts, of an action, and going to influence the thoughts, the next actions. I mean, there's nothing that exists that exists independently of. I mean, it's an interconnected um, net, and in this net, there's a fundamental part which is called consciousness. And if consciousness didn't exist, it would be practically predetermined. Because if consciousness didn't exist, what would happen? It would be very easy. It would be a kind of very complicated domino, and you would be able to predict everything as long as you understood the dynamics among things. And there's a modern scientific view that says that the mind is seen as a biological, chemical result. And so from this point of view, we could even say, and who believes in that, you could predict the mind. I mean, we think that we're free to choose and think, but we are simply consequences of chemical and biological interactions with the world around, which I agree with a part of that, but not totally. So what happens is that consciousness is that part of every living being. It's what determines a being, a sentient being from a non-sentient being. It's where there is the free will to say, I do this or I do that. And it's in that moment, given that we are living this very complex world, and every action interacts with everything else. It's not linear. Every thought, every choice changes all the rest, and even very far off that we would never expect. For me, it's really beautiful when we're able to see this interdependence. So how could my thought here influence someone on the other side of the world? In many ways, and it's not so mystical. My thought brings me to do something, and it's just. I mean, the whole world is connected. It's crazy. Yeah, even on a gross level, it's what's explained well. There was a movie called The Life of Benjamin Button, and there was a scene where there was this girl who was hit by a car, and just before being hit by a car, there was a beautiful scene that doesn't have much to do with the story, but has to do with, on the other side, it shows that there were enormous things. It said that if this person hadn't woken up late because had forgotten to turn on the alarm, if this other person hadn't done this, and etc., then she would not have been hit by the car. So they showed two scenes where she's not hit by the car, and then the other scene where she's hit, and she got hit because also the taxi driver was driving someone who was late, and I mean it was just a incredible chain of things that brings reality to be what it is. So we're living this complexity of interaction, and in this complexity of interaction, we have this incredible power, because every choice that we make, every interaction that we have, every word, every every thought interacts with everything else and transforms the present, and as in and also, of course, the future. But are we aware of this in our daily actions? No. And we're actually, I mean, we see something that's impermanent, and I mean, does it appear to us as being impermanent, or does it appear as being permanent? Let's just take any example. Let's look. A tree is a good example. Or a person is even easier. Let's take a person. We close our eyes and we open our eyes after like a minute. You know, does it appear as being the same person we saw before, or does that person appear as having changed? I mean, without philosophizing, how does that person appear? It's the same. I mean, if do we think we're looking at the same person, or do we think we're looking at a different person? No, of course, we think we're looking at the same person. And if we look at a tree, like I look outside, there are many trees. I look at the tree, I close, and then I close my eyes, and I open my eyes up, and it's the same tree. I look at the floor, and day after day, it's the same floor. I mean, does the floor get dark immediate from one instant to the next, or is it a gradual process? I mean, do I lose my hair from one instant to the next, or is it a gradual process? Does my beard grow instantly, or is it a gradual process? As a child, a, I had hair that I had hair that had a hairline that came down, that came down quite low. you know. It just it means I'm getting older. You know, we're always praying to have a long life. It's a good sign that I'm having a long life. So when we see a reality, any impermanent phenomenon, it unfortunately appears to us as being permanent. I don't know if we're able to see this. And what do we do? In front of this appearance of permanence, we do we say to ourselves, "Oh, look, it's impermanent, but it appears to me as being permanent," or do we relate to impermanent phenomena, to impermanent phenomena as if they were permanent? We relate as if they were permanent, and when at a certain point we realize it's not like that, then we're upset. We say, "Oh, you've changed. Oh, I don't have any more hair." Or look, this, look at that. And it's crazy because we grasp to the appearance, and we want everything to stay the same, even when we know deeply that it's not like that. Ask anybody. You don't need a degree in philosophy. I've already I've asked this question to all walks of life. These objects around you, are they static? Even the perfect person, or is it static or in constant transformation? What answer would we give? Constant transformation. You just need to analyze the look a little bit, but we relate as if we relate otherwise. And this generates many, many problems. So this first seal is to relate, is about, we should relate to impermanent phenomenon as being impermanent. But remember that doesn't mean that impermanent doesn't mean that it will change or one day will not exist. It means that impermanent means it is in constant transformation, constant interaction, means that every part has an enormous power. Means understanding a gross level of interdependence, which is already a lot, a coarse level of interdependence. That's marvelous. It means understanding that this present moment is perfect. It's the example that I've given many times. And the first time I realized it, I was at the beach. It's interesting because I was on a beach. It wasn't a very quiet beach. It was a time, there were a lot of people, and people had this, the people with like also a radio on the beach. It was just so bothersome. The very few times I go to the beach, it's nice to listen to the sound of the sea. Instead, there are other people who likes the music, but normally I would stay far from them. But I remember one day there was someone close who had with a radio. There was someone who was like half drunk on the other side. It was a kind of particular situation, and I was there seated. I was dressed, and I was sitting on the beach, and I was watching the waves. And at a certain point, I was doing a kind of mental game where I would see the okay, I would see the wave coming close to me, and I'd say, no, 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 don't come close, stay there. And at a certain point, obviously, it happened, that the that 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 a wave came, a stronger wave came and almost got me totally wet. But as I was just like watching this wave that was going up and then coming back, back out, and I asked myself, why does the wave bring the water here and not a centimeter closer to the sea or a centimeter closer to me? Is it just is it like um, is it just by chance, or is it the result of 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 infinite reasons? And my answer was that where the wave reaches is perfect. Because it depends on so many things. On the moon, it depends on the boat that goes by. It depends on the kind of sea bed, sea floor. It depends on maybe the children playing in the waves. You know, an infinite number of things that bring um, the fact that the wave ends up there. The temperature, I don't know, so, in all of those causes and conditions, present causes and conditions, that result is perfect because it couldn't have been different. I mean, given those present causes and conditions, the result couldn't have been different. And so I had this like moment of comprehension when I was there at the beach. And it was something that touched me. And then I tried to use I use a metaphor that's a little bit simpler, which is the tree that loses a leaf. So a leaf falls to the ground in a certain position, no? So that leaf that has fallen there, that position, is that just by chance or is it perfect? No, it's perfect. It's perfect because given this atmospheric pressure, the child that plays near the tree, the car that goes by, this infinite number of things, that leaf couldn't have fallen in any other position. Oh, but if one of those things had been different, if one of those things had been different, then the result would have been different. But it wasn't, and so that's where the leaf fell. This means that if we're able to understand that the position that where the leaf falls is perfect, then we can also understand that I'm perfect, you're perfect, we're all perfect, our lives are perfect. Doesn't mean that we don't have problems, that we don't have our sufferings, that we don't have our just general issues, and that we shouldn't do something to get better. But it means that things are the way they are as a result of a very complex interaction. And if we want something to be different, then we need to interact in this present moment for it to become different. Because I am part of this perfection. In the worldview that doesn't take into consideration the perfection of the interactions, our tendency is to victimize and blame. This is our tendency. We see only a part of things. We look for who's to blame. When there is no one to blame, there is no one to blame. There's this very complex interaction. I mean, like when I say, for example, I mean, how do you feel physically? Well, because you were born and you have a human body, with all of your genes, and you have your emotions that have influenced your growth and your organs, and you have what you've eaten and etc. So it's just very complex interaction, that has brought has brought the person to feel like that. And if you want to feel better, or feel different, then you need to interact differently. Instead, we have this idea that everything is independent from the rest, and when we really look for like linear relationships between things. We have this tendency. We look for the one to blame, and then so that we can victimize ourselves. And if and then I look for the solution. There isn't one solution. What exists are different solutions that when interacting, they bring different results. All of this is part of the first seal. And when we talk about worldview, it's not conceptual. It's the way that we relate to reality. And we relate to reality. We relate to what's impermanent as being permanent. We relate to an interdependent world as if it were autonomous. I don't know if that's clear. And this generates an enormous amount of conflicts and suffering. So the first of the four seals is to live in an impermanent reality. Everything's in constant transformation, in constant interaction. And so what I live in this present moment is a result of is complex interaction of the interactions of the past actions and present results. It's karma. Karma does not mean destiny. I mean, if consciousness didn't exist, then karma, yes, would be destiny. But free will exists, and because consciousness exists. If free will didn't exist, if consciousness didn't exist, then it's useless to talk about Buddhism here and there. Let's just go to the movies. No, no, because there's coronavirus. But in another time, yes. Nothing against the movies, on the contrary. But what I mean to say is that, what's the point to go meditating, study, etc., try to change your own behavior if everything is already predetermined? Just let it go, and, when it happens, what will be, what will be. When instead it's not like that, because consciousness exists. There's the freedom of choice. And this freedom of choice it's not that every once in a while we have an opportunity to choose. No, this free will comes in every instant. And that's the difficulty, because if every once in a while someone came to us and said, okay, now you can choose, what do you want? Then you say, okay, I want this, okay, and it's not like this. It's every instant, even from the smallest things. And the difficulty we have is we don't see the power of our own choices. Because we don't see the interaction among all the phenomena. So we're constantly victimizing ourselves and blaming others and believing that the solution is somewhere out there. So all composed phenomena are impermanent. This present moment that I'm living is fruit of everything that has come from the past, summed up to what's happening now in the present. The causes are the actions of the past that we ourselves did. They're all the actions of body, speech, and mind. The conditions are of two types. This present moment, when we talk about conditions, there are two types. There are our own conditions and those of others. Our own conditions is my own actions of body, speech, and mind, and according to the choices that I make in the present, I'm going to in this present moment, I'm also interacting with the choices of others, and the whole social context, the social cultural context that I live, also the environment. So these causes are like a kind of inertia that are generated from past actions. It's a little bit like saying, from one point of view, a metaphor I don't really like, but it explains well. I can buy everything I want, but I'm not free. But I'm conditioned by the money I have and to whether or not that thing is for sale. The money that I have saved over time or I have spent, the money that remains, that's my karmic force. Those are the causes that were created in the past. The fact that I went to the store, or whether the store is open at that time, or whether that thing is for sale, that all depends on the conditions. Because I can have all the money in the world, but if I want to buy something that's not for sale, I won't be able to have it. I can go towards a store where, if first go towards something that is for sale, but if I don't have the money, then I can't have it. So I can have the causes, but if I don't have the conditions, the results are not going to manifest. And vice versa. So this present moment is this sum of these two things. The causes created in the past and the conditions of the present. The conditions of the present at the same time are also the causes for the future. The the of our own conditions, not of others. So the actions that I do now are going to interact with the past actions and produce future results. So what we learn from this first seal is that this present moment is what it determines our future. And so it's important for us to live in the present according to what we want to be in the future. What kind of body do I want to have? I want to be healthy. Okay, so in my present moment, I need to eat in a certain way, exercise in a certain way. I need to take care, and live in my present in a certain way. Okay, and economically, how do I want things to be from now into a year, and now in 10 years? Oh, I want to have the money to be able to buy that house. So in my present moment, I need to start saving money to get there. I need to live the present in directing myself to the future, recognizing that the present is a result of the past, but it's also a cause for the future. But with our consciousness, we can choose. So, who do I want to be? It's important to desire it. And this is an important aspect in Buddhism. The fact that I desire to be a Buddha. I desire to be free of attachment and fear. I want to live in peace. I want to be capable of helping every being. I want it. But given that given that I want that, what should I do now to get there? So I live the present that's conditioned by my future, not by my past. I don't know if that's clear. What kind of relationship do I want to have with that person? I relate in the present, not with what happened yesterday, but I relate with my present with what I want to happen tomorrow. So this is part of that first seal. We need to relate to our present being conditioned by the future and not by our past. So having this first world view, it means perceiving the constant transformation, which means that there's a constant interaction. And we have this freedom of choice. We have this enormous power in every moment of our life to act, to to give direction. We are not the victim. We're not the victim of anything or of anyone. It's a very complex interaction. I think that even with this, we close up for today, because just this first seal is enough for a lifetime. You know, we don't necessarily need so much more. But let's go on to the second one. The second seal says the the first one is all composed phenomenon are impermanent. The second one says sakche tamche junalwa. Sakpa means impure. What's dirty, impure, that has impurities. Sakche tamche. Tamche means everything. So everything that is impure, junalwa, means is of the nature of suffering, has suffering. What does this mean? So what does that mean? Something that is impure, something that is polluted. It's as if I took this pure water and I put drops of arsenic inside. I mean, I could put, something even, less poisonous, but, then the water becomes impure. Something pollutes it. So what do we mean by impure here? So anything that is polluted by our own ignorance, our own selfishness, by anger, by jealousy, by 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 dissatisfaction or fear, by hatred, by this obsession to self-gratification. So what happens is anything, any person that we meet, any situation that we live, any place that we go, it doesn't matter. No matter what it is, that once it's polluted, because remember that we live reality through the filters of ourselves, and if we put a filter of anger, then it's going to be a nature, that experience is going to be a nature of suffering. If we put the filter of envy, it's going to be an experience of suffering. Doesn't matter where or who. So that second one says it doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter, in what situation you find yourself, as long as you have these filters of the obsession of gratification, dissatisfaction, envy, then you're going to suffer. So then it's useless to project your happiness onto these things, because they cannot sustain your happiness. And our worldview normally would be that, okay, reality is pure, and so if I can get that thing, then I'll be fine. We see that our mental defilements, our own inner conflicts, etc., we see them as being separate from the reality around us. And if I'm not well, it's because the world is not right. If I'm suffering, I mean, you know, we're not so presumptuous to say the world, but we say, okay, those things, that thing, these things, as long as, if I can just resolve this little thing, and this one goes away, then I'll be fine. I mean, I'm sure that if you wrote down your list of desires for Christmas, you to Santa Claus, you write down your list, what do you want this year to be happy? For you to be happy, well, what do you want? Without philosophizing. Because when we philosophize, we repeat what Lama said, what Buddha said. No, really, what do I want? If I could just change the world, if I could really just snap my fingers and obtain what I want, what would I like? I'd like to be healthy. I'd like that person who were different. I would like the situation to be different. I'd like that economically this thing was like this. I mean, everyone has his own list. And the difficulty of this second seal is that it's not that we're not influenced by situations. We are. I mean, they have power, but we have even greater power. And as long as we're taken by our own inner conflicts, it doesn't matter where we go, what we do, and who we're with, we're going to suffer. We can live with Buddha himself at a certain point, and we will start to blame Buddha. And here, there's something interesting here. How can I say? There's a way of saying a saying in Tibetan. Döpa trungwa. So it's desire and survey. One surveys a desire and does everything, everything they can to satisfy every desire. So one so as soon as you want something, you do everything you can to obtain it. There are parents who survey the desires of their children, or in a couple, one tries to survey the desires of the other, or people who watch over their own desires, you know. But if I'm surveying your desires, I'm really harming you tremendously. Because what happens is, I've already seen this. If at a certain point I have a problem, or there's something that's not going well, or there's a desire towards something, and if I think that once that thing has been resolved, then I'll be fine. I mean, I have this illusion. When everything's fine and I'm not well, it's difficult. It's more difficult. When I see that in reality, I have everything I'd like, I am not lacking anything, everything's fine around me. So everything's fine around me, but anyway, I'm dissatisfied. I wake up with anxiety. I'm not fine. So now what do I do? This requires maturity, to understand that everything that is impure is of the nature of suffering. And so I need to work on my behavior, on my deep habits, on my mind. But if we don't have the maturity to do that, and at a certain point, I don't have any more problems, now what do I do? So sometimes having problems is a way, or one kind of keeps that illusion of, okay, once that will be resolved, everything will be fine. And somehow it's like having the carrot in front of the cart, So, to make someone walk, no? To make the horse make the horse walk. But imagine giving the horse the whole cart full of carrots and he's still not happy. And maybe then you can look for an apple after the carrot, but then it's still not satisfied. But this is what we do normally in our lives. We think that our suffering is a result of the context in which we find ourselves. We live as if our suffering or the result of like, oh, missing something or, or having something that would be better not to have. I mean, if we see, we spend our lives trying to do three things, as a result of this second seal, um, to avoid what we don't want, um, to not be separated from what we like, and trying to obtain what we like. I mean, our life runs around these three things, getting our objects of desire, because I think that objects of desire are people and material things and things and people, and I project my happiness on to something. I try to get it. I try to avoid things onto which I project my own suffering. I don't want to see that person anymore. I don't want to live that situation. I don't want to feel that thing. We try to avoid the things that we don't like, and we try to and we try to not be separated from the things we like. One tries to obtain one's objects of desires, try to avoid one's objects of, um, of aversion, and not be separated from the objects of attachment. So we're always running around these three things. Because in the ordinary view, the opposite to the one that Buddha shared, the ordinary says, I suffer because I can't have what I want. Because I need to live situations I don't like. And because I need to be separated from what I do like. If we see that most of our sufferings are projected onto these three reasons. Is it clear? So if we asked most people, why do you suffer? Oh, because you can't get what you want, because you have to live something you don't like, or because you have to be separated from something you do like. And every once in a while, it can, be a combination of two or all three. In the second seal, when we say everything that is impure is of the nature of suffering, it means you think that you're suffering because you don't get what you desire, and you have to live what you don't like, and you have to be separated from the things you do like. It's not like this. According to the second seal, it says, the first question, is it possible to get object? Is it possible to satisfy your desires? What's the the more the more the more you have, the more you want, because the nature of desire is dissatisfaction. So it's not possible. I mean, if my happiness needs to depend on obtaining objects of desire, then I'm it's finished, because the more I have, the more I want, and it's like that for everything. So it's not true that we suffer because we can't have what we want. We suffer instead because we want what we can't have. Let me repeat that. It's not true that we suffer because we can't because because we can't have what we want, because we're a victim. Because if that were true, then I'd suffer because of the world, and the world doesn't allow me to have these things. It's not true that we suffer because we can't have what we want. Instead, we suffer because we want something. We want something that the causes and the conditions of the present moment don't allow. It's like saying, I suffer so much because I'd like to have two eyes in the back of my head. It would be so much more comfortable and convenient to have two eyes in the back of my head without having to turn around. But the evolution of of human being and the human body has not brought us to having eyes in the back of our head. So it's useless to suffer for that. I mean, what would we say to someone what would we say to someone who complains about not having eyes in the back of his head? We'd say, stop, you're being so silly. Or maybe I suffer because I wanted it to be sunny today and instead it's raining. Well, actually, it's the contrary, but or it, or let's say I love dawn and I don't like dusk. And every time it becomes dark, I suffer because it shouldn't be like that. It should always be sunny. What would we say to someone who suffers because there's the sunset? We'd say, go live 6 months in the North Pole, 6 months in the South Pole. If not, then just relax. Because desiring the impossible is just one more cause of suffering for yourself. Is that concept clear that you know, desiring the impossible is just creating more suffering for yourself? But in every moment when we suffer because we can't have what we want, even if it seems like that it should be given to us, remember the example of the leaf in the first seal. I desire something that maybe in another moment I will be able to have, but in this present moment, the causes and conditions don't permit it. So I'm not suffering because I can't have what I want. I'm suffering because I desire something that in this present moment, the causes and conditions don't allow me to have it. And the second point, it's not true that we suffer because we need to live situations that we don't like. If it were like that, then we would be the victim of the world. We suffer because we don't have the abilities and maturity to live the situations that we find ourselves in or with harmony. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't interact with the world or that the situations and conditions are not important. No, it doesn't mean that, because we are influenced by conditions, but we should be very clear about the second seal. That we should know why we are suffering. I suffer because I project a present that is incoherent. I don't suffer because that situation is there or because that other thing is like this. I suffer because I don't have the ability to interact with the situation in a healthier way. In other words, I'm not suffering because I need to come into contact with objects of aversion. I suffer because I have aversion to those objects. And the third point is it's not true that I suffer because that I need to be separated from what I like. I suffer because I don't have a realization of impermanence, and I want things to stay always the same, and I'm not able to accept change and enjoy the present. So when we say everything that is impure is of the nature of suffering, it means that we're projecting our happiness and our suffering onto something. And as a consequence, we're trying to change the world. We victimize ourselves. We think that the other should be different. I mean, how many times have we said, "Oh, you shouldn't be like this," or "Why is this thing like that, and this shouldn't be like this?" And then what happens in our life? We change places, we change people around us and the context, and we find ourselves faced with the same suffering. what do we say? Oh, look how unlucky I am. I mean, things just keep happening to me again and again. And the answer is the answer is this little joke that I said when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I used to like to do this joke with my friends. I'd ask them, wherever I touch myself, it hurts. When I touch my nose, it hurts. When I touch the head, it hurts. When I touch the chest, it hurts. When I touch my knee, it hurts. When I touch my foot, it hurts. What sickness do I have? I have my my finger is hurt. So our reality is that we think that our problem is in the knee and in the head and the chest, when in reality the problem is in the finger. We change our context, we change the situation, and but different of our different aspects that we have just keep continue. You know? So the second seal within the four noble truths makes reference to the suffering of all permeating suffering. So as long as we're taken by our ignorance and selfishness and our unlimited attachment and desire, dissatisfaction, hatred and resentment and fear, anxiety, etc., inevitably there will be suffering. So it's useless to look elsewhere. I mean, we could have so what is my objective? What's my life's objective? Is it to is to obtain objects of desire, avoid objects of aversion, or not be separated from my objects of attachment? Or is my life objective to develop a state of inner balance and peace that allows me to live every experience happily? My personal objective is to be well with myself and with others, independently of the situation I find myself in. And when I'm not able to live a situation well, it's because I still need to develop aspects of myself that would allow me to live that situation well. When faced with a situation that I can't live in harmony, harmoniously, then I should have the awareness that it's showing an aspect of it's showing an aspect of myself that I still need to that I need to grow. If I'm not able to face it at the moment, then I need to take some space. Um, but I think this is all quite clear when we say everything that's impure is of the nature of suffering. So here is a very clear division between the mundane life, where I project my happiness onto the world, and a spiritual life where I take a responsibility onto myself. As Buddha said, I am my own protector, I am my own enemy. I take the responsibility. I understand that I need to clean my filters. It's useless that I complain that it's dirty when it's my filters that are dirty. I need to take responsibility. To, I mean, because it's too easy. We all do it. We victimize ourselves and blame the world. When I say all, I mean all. I mean those more. There's some more, some less. But what Buddha's worldview tells us that no one is the victim of anyone. We there are negative interactions. I mean, I can interact with you in a negative way that is going to generate suffering. I can be aggressive and violent. I mean, that of course needs to be avoided. But the way in which we live something is a result of ourselves, and to get to a state of balance and satisfaction and peace, the only way is to transform the way that we experience the world, and not to try to change the world. I mean, how many times have we seen on top of have seen that we've seen marvelous conditions that are lived as if it were the hell. So this second seal, it says, everything that is impure is of the nature of suffering. Let's remember that it's not an immediate path. It's gradual. This is the direction we're going. The third seal is quite complex. It says, all phenomenon, chu tamche, everything that exists. Tongxing is empty. Dak mepa, and lacks its own identity. What does that mean? If I say that the glass is empty, first of all, it means that the glass exists, because if it didn't exist, it couldn't be empty. So if I say all phenomenon are empty, it means that all phenomenon exist. I mean, it's important to remember this. But they're empty. When I say that something is empty, I need to understand that it's empty of something. When I say it's empty, there are two important parts. What is empty, and of what is it empty? There are two very important parts of this, because there's one problem about when we talk about shunyata, vacuità. One can often put emphasis on it being empty, but if you can forget what is empty and of what is it empty, because the emptiness can exist only in conjunction with these two other points. Something needs to be empty, and it needs to be empty of something. Because if I asked you, is the glass full or empty? The answer is of what? Is it full of milk? No, it's empty of milk. It lacks milk. Is it full of water? Halfway. So every time we say something is empty, we need to remember that there is something that is empty, and it's empty of something. So all phenomena are empty. They exist, but they're empty of something. Of what? Of something. They're empty of an autonomous, independent, inherent existence. Intrinsic, inherent existence. What does that mean? When we see an object, we see a person, we see a situation, are we aware that what I'm seeing is in reality the reflection of all the filters that I have inside? Or do I think that I'm seeing reality? When we see another person, a situation, this present moment, how does how does reality appear? As being the reality or being the fruit of complex interdependence from the observer? It appears to us as being the reality. But what happens is reality, when we perceive it, is a real. First of all, is non-dual, but it appears to us as being dual. Let me explain myself better. When I hear the sound of the bell, the experience that each one has when listening to the sound of the bell depends on what we call contact, which is one of um, the factors. I mean, there's this sensory object, which is the vibration in the air. It, there's the sense power, which is our own hearing, our eardrums. And then there's the sensory consciousness, which is a part of our mind that takes that vibration that is perceived by our hearing and it sends a signal to say there's a sound. And on top of that sound, there's a fourth part, there's 3 plus 1, which is our own discernment, where we say, this is a bell. Because at the beginning, I mean, just it's a sound, it's a form, and then we give it a name. It's dushe is discernment that gives this name. So every time we perceive something, we live something, what happens is we have a sensory object, sense power, and sense and sense sense consciousness and discernment. I remember once we were in Thailand and someone said, "Oh, look at a beautiful moon," and they said, "Oh, wow, look at this, so big, it's wonderful." And sorry, I, 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 I said, "No, this is a big. This is a. It was a huge balloon, like a huge ball that was lit up, you know." And so everyone thought that it was the moon, and then I said, when I said no, it's just it's a big lit ball, and some people got upset that I was ruining this mystical moment. But I said, look, the moon's over there. But when we see something, what does the eye see? Form and color, but it's the sum of these three things of and on top of those three things, we attribute a meaning. So that's what we see. So I'm unable to perceive anything at all, independently from my own sense powers, the position in which I find myself. So the the sound that comes to me, because when I play the bell, I ask you, are we all listening to the same sound without analyzing? Yes, but the vibration in the air and the sound that gets to each one of us and those of you at home, I mean, is it the same sound, or if it's different? It's similar, but remember that what is similar by definition is different. So the vibration of the sound that comes through the air and comes to each one of us, is all different. We're all in different positions. So the sense object, the sense power, the sense consciousness is different, and the discernment, the name given is different. So are we experiencing the same reality, or are we experiencing a different reality? It's different. But we're not aware of that. For us, it appears as if that's the bell and that's it. I mean, we're not aware of these interactions with the observer, this non-duality, because the sound that I hear doesn't exist independently of my own mind, my own sense powers, of me, the observer. But that experience of hearing the bell doesn't exist without the bell that is being played. So there's a non-duality between the object of perception and perceiver or observer. When they come to us, we perceive it as if they are two different things. You know, as the reality seems like it's something uh, outside of me. It's something independent. I'm here and I'm seeing there. But when we analyze, it's not like that. Nothing exists independently. Nothing exists independently of me. The external reality does exist, but doesn't exist independently of our own inner reality. So all phenomena are empty of their own autonomous, intrinsic reality because they're interdependent. They, they have a reciprocal dependency. They're mutually dependent. So it's the example that's given is here and there. So we take two chairs, for example. We sit down in one chair, then I'm sitting in this chair here. And there is that chair. I get up from this chair and I go and sit in that chair. When I sit in that chair, where do I find myself? I'm sitting in this chair. And this chair then becomes that chair. The here and there, this and that, are mutually dependent. One doesn't exist without the other. If we want to make it a little bit more complicated, is also we talk about a lot and little, big and small, long and short. These are mutually dependent. Big doesn't exist. Um, exists exclusively based on something that is smaller, and vice versa. Long exists independence on short. Even when we talk about time, so it's a lot of time or short amount of time, they autonomously they don't exist in and of themselves. These references, we could spend hours talking about this, entire days to talk about this, but in essence, we live with we live where the observer and every object observed is they are mutually dependent, because our external reality exists, but it doesn't exist independently of how we perceive it. If we use a more modern term, that's used in quantum physics, it says that in every phenomenon, there are an infinite number of possibilities. Like saying, this object has infinite possibilities. It can be a glass, it can be a weapon, it can be a vase, it can be an object of attraction, aversion, it can generate fear, just an infinite number of things. And all of those possibilities exist in this same instant, in this same object, and the observer, let's say, quote unquote, chooses one of the infinite possibilities. And in our own ignorance, we see as if that possibility were the only reality, excluding everything, all the others, as if they were wrong. But if I ask, among these infinite possibilities, really, what is this object? No, there is no really. This is nothing other than an infinite number of possible things through which the observer chooses one. So when we say all phenomena are empty of intrinsic existence, even if they appear as if they were intrinsic or autonomous, it's not like that. And this ignorance of seeing and grasping to reality as if it were independent and intrinsic is what generates, as a consequence, selfishness, this obsession to self-gratification, which then it turns into to fear and jealousy, anxiety, and and anger, etc., suffering. So at the root of our mental defilements is our selfishness, and even deeper is this ignorance, this grasping to reality in an incoherent way. It's in ignorance of seeing impermanent reality as being permanent, or grasping at reality as if it were inherently existent and independent. And Buddha's worldview takes us and this is the most difficult of everything, he takes us, shows us that we can see that everything is interdependent, and so nothing exists in and of itself. This takes us to having a greater responsibility for our actions, and are you starting to see the connection among all the seals? But these are specific points here. On a practical level, I mean, there are different aspects. To understanding that when someone speaks to me, what the other one said. In reality, I don't know. All that I know is what I heard. For example, I've tried to change this in my own life the best way possible. I never say, you said. I say, because what you wanted to say, I don't know, but I say, I heard. Okay, all I know is that to my eardrum, certain sounds came to my ear, to which I gave certain meaning. So I'm in that situation, and in that situation, there were certain sounds, there were certain images, and I attributed a certain meaning to all of that. It's not that that situation was that. It's an important point here is that there are there are ways. There are many ways to see it, the same situation, and there's some ways. Some ways are correct and some are erroneous. This third seal doesn't say that everything exists based only on the observer, Because if I'm, looking in a shop window and I see a mannequin, it doesn't matter how much I think that union of parts to which I attribute person, no matter how much I think that mannequin is a person, I have an erroneous view. It's not a person. It can't sustain the name that I've given it. And how do I know if a perception is correct or incorrect? Remember that there is not one correct way. There are endless number of correct. But I need to check. I need to check to see that those the name that I've given to that thing, if that union of parts to which I've given a name, if it can sustain its functions. It's interesting. Like if we watch two people who are arguing, you should, two people are arguing, so, if my point of view can be sustained, can be upheld, by, even if we have two points of view that are different, but at the same time, each argument can be upheld, at that point we should ask ourselves which point of view, you're right and I'm right, okay? It's an object of anger, but it's an object of compassion. So at that point we should say which one is more beneficial. So it's a question about what, it's not about what is right and what is wrong. I mean, reality is not so, it's not so black and white that there's one thing that's right and one thing that's wrong. I mean, it's wrong once I project something that is not able to sustain the characteristics and functions that of that name. I mean, if I take a chocolate cake and I think that it's a cushion to, to sit on, it's not going to work. Or if I take you know, if if I take, if I look at an image of an, an or for example, and ancient texts give the example of, like if I go out at night where it's quite dark and I see rope that's coiled up, and I think it's a snake. In my reality, is it a snake? No, it's not a snake, because no matter how much I believe, no matter how scared I got, that coiled up rope cannot sustain can't support the characteristics and functions of a snake. Another example would about something that doesn't exist. Ribonra. This is in debate. They use this. They talk about the horns of a rabbit, because if someone sees a rabbit when it's like at dusk, maybe that a rabbit with his ears up, maybe it looks the ears look like horns. But no matter how much I can tell you about having seen the horns of a rabbit, I mean, maybe I can describe it to you in detail, and I'm absolutely certain that I saw a rabbit with horns. The, the, no matter how convinced I am, a rabbit doesn't have horns. This means, I mean, that erroneous views do exist. I mean, it's not just because I believe it and in my reality it is like that. No, there are infinite erroneous perceptions. So a perception is correct once the union of parts and the interaction of the parts can sustain the characteristics and the functions of that thing. And there's a whole part of philosophy. I mean, how do you know if it's right or wrong or can sustain? And here there's a whole universe in there, years of study. you know, there's a whole, part of debate and logic. How do I know if an inferential perception is correct, or I'm using logic? There's a whole world here behind that. So what's important for us is to understand that everything that I perceive, everything that I see, that I hear, no matter how solid and real it appears, it doesn't exist independently from the value that I am attributing to it. It doesn't exist in a solid way, the way it appears to me. And the same thing happens with our own identity. I mean, who am I? We appear to ourselves as being something solid when in reality it's not like this. Like I said before, this is a subject that we could spend days on, and it's not the time for that. I'm just going over the 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 main idea. The fourth seal means beyond suffering or nirvana. It, there's peace. Nanya, Nanya means suffering. Le Deba means beyond. Nanya La Deba is also together in Sanskrit is nirvana. Shiva, peace. It means it's a very important point that each one of us has the ability to reach a deep state of peace and go beyond the suffering. That we have this potential. Each one of us can. I'm ignorant, yes. I'm full of anger. I have jealousy, yes. I am selfish. But if I can generate an interdependence that gradually is different, this is going to let me gradually live the world differently, change my worldview, change who I am. It's a long process, no doubt. I don't want to change false hopes, but expectations, but it's possible. So the objective that Buddha brought us, that we find in this fourth seal, doesn't depend on something or someone, but it's an objective that each one of us can reach, this deep state of peace, this Buddhahood. Buddha Shakyamuni was someone who, at a certain point of his existence, he found himself in this situation that he found himself in the situation we find ourselves in. There's a saying that says, in the with the correct enthusiastic effort in the right direction, even an ant can reach enlightenment. Any sentient being, if he generates a positive interdependence, and gradually is going to transform his way of being and gradually get to this state. And this last seal brings us to a very important point, which is that same faith that we should have in Buddha, in what guides us, in the Guru, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We should have the same faith in ourselves, because if I don't have faith in myself, if I don't say I can do it, I will never make the necessary effort to get there. It's like when we go to a doctor, we need to have faith that we can be healed. I mean, the doctor's there to help us, but we need to have faith in our own healing. Among them all, the spiritual traditions that I've known, the few that I've seen, I think that this is something very special about Buddhism, that says you can do it. Why? Because you're interdependent. This is the only reason why we would be able, because we go back to the first seal. Every phenomenon interacts with the next, and if we create a virtuous interdependence, and gradually our mind, our being, is like it's malleable. It's malleable because it's something that interacts and transforms, and as a consequence, this fourth seal shows us that our objective in life is not to accumulate wealth or knowledge or position. It's not to do this or to do that. Our objective is to be peace, to be satisfaction, to be harmony, to be joy, to be wisdom. Our objective is to it's not part of the four seals, because it's a part of the teachings that doesn't correspond to all the teachings, because it's part of the Mahayana teachings. But what gives meaning to life is to be able to help others get out of suffering. We cultivate and we perfect our qualities to be able to help others. So, I wouldn't say that Buddhism is part of a, sorry, you know, all beings have the same value in Buddhism. We can't. It's not a humanistic worldview. An ant has different conditions than a human being, but if we were to take a microscope and we were able to see what our culture calls the soul, what in Buddhism we call body and mind, a very subtle body and mind. We look at an ant or we look at also the person we love most in this world, we would see that they're made up of the same thing. They're different, and each one has its own individuality. So that's why we also say that all Buddhas are of the same nature, and one doesn't have more qualities than the other. But they're but they also have their own individuality. So we're all different. We're not one thing. We interact with each other. It's a vision, it's a view that says that all beings, without exception, we interact, and we have a body, a mind, a reality that's interdependent. And for this reason, we can gradually or suffer more or suffer less. We can gradually or cultivate more love and balance and wisdom, or we can cultivate more dissatisfaction and anger and ignorance, selfishness, etc. And it's for this reason that we can do it, if we create this positive interdependence. So here's the part of the path. So how can I do? I need to cultivate a kind of a view and live and to live a certain conduct according to the view, and then use the tools to familiarize myself. So we've divided into three parts: view, conduct, and familiarization, or also translated sometimes as meditation. So those are the tools that we're going to use that we're going to use to direct ourselves in the right way. Someone could say, "Oh, but it seems really it's really going to take a lot of effort." Yes, I sincerely think that anybody can get close to Buddhism and take everything that they feel is beneficial. If someone wants to learn mantras, and that's it, that's fine. If someone wants to listen to aspects of philosophy, that's fine. If someone wants to come to the center because they feel good at the center, they feel good close to the Lama, that's fine. But if someone wants to follow Buddha's teachings and take refuge, which is another aspect, then really it's a commitment that will involve every aspect of your life. There's not a moment where there's not the time where you're following teachings and time when you're not following teachings. There's not a time where I'm practicing the Dharma and another time where I'm not practicing the Dharma. There's not my life and then the Dharma practice. There's this separation doesn't exist anymore, because every action that we do is part of our path. The practice of Dharma is mostly can be found in family and friends. So, how we relate with our family, how we relate with our friends, with our coworkers, and the times when we listen to teachings or we do our practice. That's the time we are generating the strength. But it's in our daily life where. It's in our daily life that we're actually practicing without taking without taking away any importance to meditation and study and mantra, but we have, a practice is divided into two parts, the moments of meditation and the moments between meditation. So for most of us, I mean, our moments, for serious practitioners, the moments um, um, between sessions would be just a couple hours, during a retreat you do 12 hours of meditation and 12 hours of, where it's eating and sleeping and like this. But for us, maybe the time between sessions can last for a week, a month. So the way we live in our daily life is extremely important, for everyone, but especially for those who meditate, just don't meditate much. But there's a possibility even there, because it said that in all the teachings I've read and received up till now, I mean, I mean, how one how one acts during meditation and how one acts in between sessions is of the same importance. So our spiritual path can be found in every moment, in every action, in every context. And what's important, it's not about being Buddhist or having a Buddhist center membership card. It's about how I live, how I relate to everyone, how I transform my mind. In just a few words, I don't desire to live in a Buddhist world where everyone's Buddhist, but I deeply, deeply desire that in this world that there's more and more love and respect and gratitude and wisdom and satisfaction and coherence, and less anger and aggression and attachment and envy and selfishness and ignorance. This I absolutely desire. Now let there be more harmony. And if that is present, then Dharma is present too. And this is what's important. Now, I told you just a superficial, um, just superficially what it means to follow the Buddhist worldview. It's what Buddha transmitted. It's a it's a it's a it's a path for lifetimes. So it's something that we need to see many times and reflect on many times, and always give ourselves the direction again and again. So let's do our dedications. I thank all of you for being here together. The only thing I ask is if there's something that you think could be beneficial, try to remember it, try to put it into practice.
Jetsun lame kotse raptenchi namkar trinle chokchur gepadang losan tempe dreme sasumki drove munsel taktu negyorchi kewa kuntu yanda lamadang Dralme cheki pela longche ching Sadan lamge yente rabzone Dorje change kopang nyurtoba Shoya nimo dele tsendele Nime kuyan delekshin Nyinsen takto delekpe Koncho sumke jinge lob Concho sumke ngodrubuts, concho sumke trascishon. All'alba o al tramonto, di notte o durante il giorno, possano i tre gioielli concederci le loro benedizioni, possano aiutarci ad ottenere tutte le realizzazioni e cospargere il sentiero della nostra vita con molti segni di buon auspicio. Simche ne ba cinye ba nyurdu ne le targyurchi drove neni malye ba takto chungwa me brashong me nama tudan denba dan sanga de jodruba ye kandro simbo la sopa ninje semdan dengyurchi chona kuna ludan semdunga ne ba cinye pa tedadagi sonamki dega gyatso topa arashong. In tutte le direzioni, qualunque corpo o mente, malato o sofferente che ci sia, possano essi, tramite i poteri dei nostri meriti, dell'energia positiva qui generata, raggiungere un oceano di felicità e benessere. Sema chusudra lam tudra lam la parche mi possa la mente diventare il Dharma, possa il Dharma diventare il sentiero, possa il sentiero essere libero da interferenze. Grazie a tutti.